Good morning to our guests on the West Coast, and good afternoon to everyone on the East Coast. And thanks for joining us for today's presentation. My name is Sergio Aranda, Product Marketing Manager with EBuilder, providers of web-based capital program management software. I have the pleasure of having Mr. Tim Woodley, Director of Operations with the West Linn-Willsonville School District, as today's presenter. Hi, Tim. How are you doing?
I'm doing great.
Moderating today's presentation is Jonathan Entevi, EBuilder founder and CEO. John, how are you?
I'm doing great.
During today's presentation, Tim will share his philosophy and his approach to managing the school district's $98 million bond program, and more specifically, how this approach helped his team achieve a $376,000 deductive change order. John, let me turn it over to you.
Great. It's a pleasure to introduce Tim today. He was recently at our user conference and got to present this information, and I thought it was very powerful. You're going to hear a couple of themes. Not only is there a financial theme of some real dollars that he saved, and he'll talk specifically about how he got to that $376,000 number, but there's also a component of integrity that he will weave throughout the presentation. And I found it fascinating of how he weaved both of those, into his program. And frankly, we have a lot of program managers on the line today. We have a lot of AEs and contractors, and also peers of Tim. And I think Tim is going to hit all those various aspects. So there'll be something in there for each of you. So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Tim Woodley.
All right. Thanks, John, and welcome to the audience wherever you're sitting. I happen to be in a fully enclosed cubicle box in our operations center at West Linn-Willsonville School District here in the Emerald Empire of the Pacific Northwest outside of Portland, Oregon. It's raining, and it's been raining like crazy. But for us, this is Christmas, right? You guys get sun for Christmas. Some folks get snow, I suppose. We get rain, and it is raining. Our operations director, or our facility manager, tells me today that it's one of those rare days it's raining across our, whatever we have, 1.5 million square feet, and we don't have any water coming inside. That's always good news. So let me start. That's me right there. So on my desktop, on my computer at work, I've got the EBuilder icon, and I go to that, and it just simply takes me to the login page. So sometime, I forget when it was, this summer perhaps, I was showing someone else about EBuilder. We were talking through it, and so I went on the web and typed in EBuilder into Google, and this screen came up. I can't tell you how shocked I was. I had no idea. Here I am, the poster child for EBuilder. I've got my own groupies that follow me around now, it seems.
So this was a surprise to you, you're saying, when you didn't know we were going to put you up there, huh?
I didn't know you were going to put me up there. That's what you get for being nice to people. Suddenly I'm across the internet. So I'm going to make a confession right here to you and everybody else, and that is I'm not a power user of EBuilder. Of course we have it, and it's what we use for capital program management. When we purchased this, I thought I would be. I had absolutely every intention of knowing everything about EBuilder and being engaged in it at every level all day, but I'm not. My role in our school district is that of operations director, so I'm on the superintendent's team. I manage everything, school bus contracts and food service activity and safety and health, making sure lights are on, that lawns are mowed, the activities that happen in our school, all kinds of things of a public school system. And also manage a capital improvement program. And what I find is that I'm too busy. And I think in some ways, that experience, and others probably are able to connect with that, has now, after 2 years of using EBuilder, helped me understand how best to use it and the advantages that it brings to me each day to be able to keep in touch with the big picture, know what's going on overall without having to get into the detail. And I think that's a benefit, and I'll probably talk a little more about that as we go along. But for the moment, what I can tell you is that I'm simply not a power user, but in my words I say I am a user of the power of eBuilder. I'm sure that eBuilder's got plenty of high-profile folks that could talk about their product from a user's point of view. But I'm not quite sure why they selected me. But to the extent that we were an early adopter as a public school system of this software, we probably have a fairly unique story. So I'm going to kind of just lay out that story. And I'm going to do it fairly straightforward. I've got an engineering background, so I'm somewhat linear here. This is the outline for the presentation. So I'm going to do a little organizational overview, just tell you who we are and what we're doing. A little bit about our past practices. We've had bonds in the past that we've managed, and we know how we did that, and I'm going to talk just briefly about that. Some lessons learned from those experiences and why we looked at program management software to start with. How we came up with eBuilder. Of course, as a public agency, that was an important process. The implementation and rollout, some specific eBuilder solutions, not all of them, but some. And then the results to date. How has eBuilder helped us? So an organizational overview, who are we? We are West Linn-Willsonville School District. We have about 8,000 students and growing. We're on the south edge of the Portland metro area in Oregon. Unlike many districts, at least in our area, and possibly across the nation, we continue to grow. And it's not at a great pace, but it's sustained over many, many years of 2, 3, 4% every year. And you take that times that many students, and it's increments of classrooms that are added each year, as well as the need to keep up with and maintain existing facilities and buildings and that sort of thing. We have 2 cities that we deal with, plus an unincorporated large rural county area. Because of this growth, we've both needed to pass bonds to build new schools, and we've been able to do it. This is just a map of our district, and I'm going to roll quickly through some buildings that we have. These are our schools that our kids go to every day. They are the recipients of some incredibly good design. Our community is extraordinarily proud of this, and we find that helps build the support. We honor our kids, we honor our parents.
Tim, I have to share with you that that mindset and the way these buildings look, and I live in South Florida, the buildings in South Florida of the school district system look nothing like the ones you're showing here. The ones you have here are much prettier, and they're grand, and they're exciting. I think of when I went to the University of Florida and the campus was so pretty. That was my first impression. I have to say I'm a little jealous because I think the mindset's a little different down here than it is up in Portland. It seems like.
We interact with kids and parents a lot, and the kids tell us how happy they are with the stuff that they have. And when they talk about what stuff is, it's not only a lot of the technology they have, but athletic facilities, the buildings themselves, the features of the buildings, and that sort of thing. We land here at the end on an old building. This is a district administration building. It sits out in the county. It's a historic building. We're actually adding on to this right now with the current bond that we have. So this is the beginning of this bond program for us. You'll see a date there at the bottom, February of 2008. It was in November of 2008 that we passed a bond for $100 million, approximately, to build a couple new schools and improve all of the buildings and facilities around the district. It's fairly typical of how we go about it. Often other districts do the same thing where you'll do improvements as well as new work. The reason I bring this up is it's kind of our Bible in terms of what we promised and how we expected to get to where we needed to go. It gave the history of why we're doing it, all that sort of thing, and it's been very useful. There's a website there at the bottom, and I would encourage the listeners to go to that website and look at that if you're thinking about putting a capital improvement program together. It's a different way of approaching. It's got a lot of narrative, really nice pictures, but it's got the, important stuff in it too in terms of the rationale, the numbers, how much things will cost, that sort of thing. But this was the beginning for us. This was the project list. Folks that have some familiarity with EBuilder would recognize the font and type that's there. That's typical EBuilder project list. But the point is, I think there's 60 to 65 projects that that capital improvement plan laid out. This is the list of what they are. It encompasses $100 million. 2 of them are new schools. All the rest are smaller improvements across the district. And it's all focused on educating kids. We have a group of folks. So I want to talk briefly about this. What I know, is that all human enterprise is about relationships. It's the people that get things done. It's creating relationships amongst and across, the various disciplines and talents of people that are around you and the interaction of people with one another. This is our bond team, or some folks on it. Recently, I've gone to some conferences around the country that talk about the notion of blended teams. This is not unusual for us. We have people that work for the school district on the bond team at various levels. We have independent project managers that work here. Hury International is a construction management firm, large firm, very capable, has a presence here with us with one person in kind of a comptroller leadership role. We have our architects, our engineers, designers at the table. We meet once a week on Thursdays at a kind of a big round table effort that keeps everybody plugged in. And so this is our project team. To help you also understand a little bit more about our district, this is a bit of a bird walk, but I'm going to take it. And it has to do with what John mentioned briefly earlier, and that had to do with integrity. Integrity, in my mind, is doing the right thing even if nobody's watching. So I heard about this earlier this fall, and I just, took the occasion to bring it to this conversation. What happened was our assistant superintendent was downtown, and he came back to his car, and there was a note on the car, and that note is that note that's on the left there. And it says, "Hi, I bumped your car slightly with my door. Can hardly see it, but call me if you want. Rear passenger corner about 3 inches below the light." So he even pointed out where it was. There's the phone number, but you can't call the guy. And then on the right is simply the note from our assistant superintendent telling me about it and that he gave it to me. But the point is, here's somebody that did that. How often does that happen? And how often would somebody tell you about it? We know that integrity is key to success in so many ways, both personal, professional, in our district. And quality character traits is how good bond programs and business enterprise moves forward in a positive way. And I just wanted to point that out.
Tim, in Miami, that note would have been, "You parked too close to my car. How dare you ding my door?" And he would have waited for you to come back, so he could have gotten in a road rage fight with you and probably shot you.
Yeah.
So that's the difference between Miami and Portland.
So past practice and challenges. How did we manage capital programs in the past? So there's me peering at a bunch of books. It was, as you all can imagine, our last bond passed in 2002, and we went through that effort. There was a lot of technology that was available at the time. And I think EBuilder was around at that point, but not necessarily known as much as it is today, as well as just the hardware to be able to use and the understanding of how programs work, that sort of thing. We used a variety of different things like Excel and Microsoft Word, Microsoft Project, a variety of those sorts of things. In that bond, we had staffing. Nobody needs to understand this directly. The important part is there was, on the left there, it says 75 million in bond money. We had 8.5 FTE devoted to that, and it translates into $8.82 million per FTE. This will come up again as a comparison a little later, but for that bond, that's how we did it. There was quite a bit of FTE really in our business office, just around the AP, account payable function. And I'll walk through a little later as to how that changed. Of course, there was office management. I'm going to go back real quick if I can. I can't. Anyway, oh, there it is. Okay, so those are real pictures out in our warehouse of the files from that bond, and that's only half of them. I only just took half of them. Everything was heavily into paper. We used, like I said, different programs to do some things, but it was paper-oriented. This was a simple Excel spreadsheet that was the board report that was kind of roll-up of everything, but it was hand-done. You know, nothing came from someplace else necessarily. There were large spreadsheets behind it, but there was hand put into it, and I had to manipulate this. I would do a report, I think, every month. It would take me at least 3 days, sometimes a week, of just being in my office by myself, working through all of the numbers to come up with this simple report. Here is just, I mean, it's meaningless to look at, but it's that spreadsheet the size of Nebraska that everybody had, possibly some people still have, to keep track of stuff. This is a contingency log, very simple, of course, but, you know, standalone, someplace else, somebody keeping track of things. The RFI log. So what were the challenges of doing it that way? It took a lot of time. It just took a lot of time. There was faulty data. If you put the number in incorrectly, it would only report back what you put in it, and if it was wrong to start with, it's still wrong. There was out-of-date data. There's a lag between our business office and us, and while the data may be correct, it's so out of date that it was useless. There was inconsistency in the data, in the language we used, in the reports that were given. Retrieval was difficult. We knew it was there. It was in one of those boxes somewhere, but where? Document control. You know, when I go back and look at our files now from those past bonds, I find the same document filed 6 times in the same box, and each one might be just a little different. And all of you can imagine what that's like to find the true and correct one. Inconsistent solution software. You know, you'd start on with some sort of program and it wouldn't work, and you'd move to something else, or Our architect would be using one, we'd be using something different. There was handwork versus computer work. I talked briefly about, the hours of time I would sit at my computer trying to get things on correctly. Difficult communication. Did everybody use the same language? Were you looking at the right document? Compromised decision making. Clearly, and I would hate to admit it, but clearly it was compromised just because of the timing, which then compromised the public record, which is our responsibility to maintain with, let me think, integrity, tension with the board, with public, consultants, contractors, staff. And it's true. I mean, we work well together. Everyone is respectful, but there was tension. And at the end of the day, the perception was a lack of integrity. When I could not produce or answer with integrity, a question, that was the perception. And everybody knows perception is fact until it changes. So lessons learned. Why did we look for program management software? Why? Past experience, and I had an idea there had to be a better way. It was a struggle. We were successful in our past bonds. I don't want to say that we weren't. We were doing it very much like most other folks in the industry, but it was a struggle, and I thought with, the way things are nowadays with technology, there simply had to be a better way. And like I said, current technology was available. We had it in our district available to us. Certainly the nation and the world had much better technology. We have an uncompromised need for quality. We have fixed schedules, as everybody does, and of course, there's never enough money. Those three things, like on that stool, it's a three-legged stool, and it takes each of them balanced. Our internal culture here is one of innovative, tech-rich environment. Our demographic is kind of the higher end of folks that work downtown Portland in some very tech-rich environments themselves. They have an expectation that we needed to step up to. A new bond, as many know, new, fresh funding provides a fresh start. You get a clean slate. And at the beginning is the best time to take advantage of that.
So, Tim, I have a question.
Sure.
You have a perspective, and that perspective is unique, perhaps because you used and ran programs before with Excel and Word and email, and you mentioned that they were always run successfully in the past, and now you've been running this bond program on a system like EBuilder. If you take the EBuilder piece out of it and just generically say a system, what perspective could you offer to a lot of your peers that are on the call today, close to 100 of them, that are saying, well, what we have seems good enough, and I'm using Excel and Word, and it seems good enough. Well, could you offer a perspective that might get them to think about the opportunity differently?
To me, it's the integration of that EBuilder brings to a variety of practices and disciplines that gives it common language, continuity across all of the requirements and interests of individuals. There's a broad group of folks interested in what we're doing, from our public, to our board, to administrators, teachers, parents, kids, building authorities, permit specialists, designers, financial people, schedule people, all of those folks that are not constantly in the same conversation with us. They come and go, they plug in and they move out, and the consistency of that EBuilder brings in a common platform that everybody can work in and can rely on each time they plug into it, I think is one of the most compelling reasons to do it. That and having confidence that it is always accurate. And I'll give an example here in a little bit, but it's that confidence that builds the integrity of the entire system, and that integrity is not just the system itself, but it's the people behind EBuilder as well, the support that you get from the beginning to the end, and everybody's in it for the long haul.
Great, thanks.
So I'm going to move on. So John, now where was I? Let's see. Lessons learned. Why did we look for program management software? Public stewardship, responsibility, sustainability. These are, big words in public work. Transparency, big deal. Accountability. Of course, we have a desire to pass future bonds. Secure funding. It's important. You got to build the public trust. There are promises that you make, and there's promises you keep, and the hope is that they're the same. And of course, value added at the end of the day. This is kind of an interesting, quick little timeline, and I'm not going to go into the detail of it, but we went through a process to come up with EBuilder. We, of course, have to, do some due diligence. You can see names of other providers on this at the front end part. Like I said, our bond passed in November of 2008. Through December, January, February, we went through a period of looking at a variety of different solutions. We didn't just, happen upon EBuilder. There were a variety of others that were competing for our business and interest, and this simply lays out how we did it and the timeline that's involved. This also is on our website if anybody ever would want to see it. If you're in that procurement process, it'll give you an outline of kind of the time it took for us to get here.
So, Tim, I had the pleasure of working with you and with Scott Perala, who was your counter person, if you will, at Erie. And to me, that was a very pleasurable experience working with you and him, and I respect both of your abilities highly. So selfishly, I always like to have, smart owners with other smart people around them. Would you recommend to others to get guidance from other program managers? Was it a good thing? Was it a bad thing? Because there are a lot of owners that, in my experience, will just dump the decision entirely to the program manager, but you worked together with Scott in this case, and it was very successful. Would you do that again, or do you have any comments about that?
Well, the answer is simple, and it is yes. I would do it again, and I would do it that way again. Often folks like me, I kind of sit in put on the shoes of the owner. And whether we want to admit it or not, often we're in a bit of a silo. We're somewhat isolated. We have counterparts in other school districts, but we don't talk a lot about it. Bonds for us are somewhat episodic. I'm a professional construction manager, so I have a good understanding and knowledge of how, to go about doing this. But, third party, and that's another thing that EBuilder brought as well, and Erie was also very useful in it, of bringing, third party conversations and peer review and, mentorship around thinking things through early. And the ability to have outside, up-to-date knowledge and information about, what the industry's doing at the point in time, what's available out there, all that sort of thing. I would very much recommend it. as a public agency, we can't avoid our responsibility to be responsible. And so doing it right to start with is the right thing to do. And, of course it costs some money to do it, but you can leverage that money best by doing it early in a good way. And bringing other professional folks to help you early is really important.
Thank you. And we're at the halfway point so far, just as the time.
Okay. So here's how EBuilder helped us address some of these past challenges. At the very outset, when we were in contact with EBuilder, and John, you can view this any way you like, but from our end, this is how we experienced it. It was very interesting. All the other vendors were more than happy to take our money really right very quickly and say they could handle and do whatever we wanted to do. EBuilder was different, very different up front. It was more like, why should we sell you EBuilder? And I suppose you guys have your own internal reasons, and I've heard some of them, and that does make sense. But, there was a point where we were actually having to convince you guys that we would be a good partner and client. But that caused some very early, deep conversations about what are you trying to get out of this? What didn't work before, and, what makes you think something else is going to make it work better for you? That was a very useful exercise. Again, it provided that third-party review I talked about a little bit where, EBuilder came to us as a third party and helped us understand things from a different point of view. It invited that collaboration. EBuilder, in the conversation, allowed me also to bring someone like Huri and Scott into it. It created a common platform then, EBuilder as a tool. Provided one source for budget, reporting, communication, all those things that you see on the screen came to us through a program management software like EBuilder. This was a big deal. Anywhere, anytime. I have an iPhone, and I got it at the beginning of the bond, and I can log on to EBuilder anywhere, anytime. All of our program managers have the same capability, and it's proven to be extraordinarily useful. So we have EBuilder online then, and we're off and going. So the implementation and rollout, what are some specific EBuilder solutions? So here's one. I'm going to take just a minute. This looks fairly simple, what you see on the screen here. And the notion of project-based versus site-based. Everything in our district has historically been site-based. Every, invoice, every action is at a particular site. When we set up our program, to start with, it was EBuilder through the implementation that made us really think hard about how we wanted to do this. And at the end of the day, we changed, and that says something about a public school system. We changed from site-based to project-based and created projects that aligned with what our promises in our bond were. And this is that list of projects, and many of these occur at various sites. And keeping track of that is a bit tricky because at the end of the day, invoices to our business office have to identify a site. But even in the numbering, the project numbering on the side, there's great depth and thought into what that number is, what it means, how it aligns both internally to EBuilder and then externally to our business office. Some consistency and identifications. This is simply our budgeting codes. Now, don't anybody, in fact, I should move on quickly because if you have these codes, you have the key to our kingdom. You could almost get anything you wanted out of this. But each project has this set of budget codes assigned to it, and these are all well thought out way in advance. They align with, we use a Lawson system in our business office, so the numbers align with Lawson, they align with EBuilder, and therein is the accuracy and the integrity of keeping track of the financials. And that took a lot of work.
There's a question about that, and you don't have to spend a lot of time on it, but they're asking if you did how or if you integrated the financial system with EBuilder.
Okay.
Was that reconciliation that you just referenced just putting two documents side by side, or is it more of a real-time automation? And what was the basis for your decision there?
Yeah, that question comes up quite a bit. We were given the opportunity to fully integrate electronically, and I think EBuilder can do it. We chose not to, and it was on purpose. But what we did do was create these codes that carry across EBuilder and Lawson. We do reconcile quarterly, so we get reports from our business office, and they're electronic, and we cross-reference and check all paid receipts against what's in EBuilder so that we have accuracy in it. But we chose not to do it. Some larger programs, perhaps, or if you have more expertise than we might have within our business office unit itself, we find that it works really, really quite well for us. And one of the things that, so here's a quick little story. I was walking down the hallway of our admin building, and the business officer came out, and he said, "Tim, I've been not able to sleep recently because one of your reports says that you think you have more money than I think you have." And of course, that's what would stop any program manager's heart, because you need to be on the same page. And I said, "Well, Bill, I'll check on it." And I looked in EBuilder and thought that my reports were correct. I went back. I said, "Bill, I don't know where you're coming up with this, but I think we're correct." He said, No, there's something wrong here. You don't have as much money as you think you do." Again, I went back, and of course, from past practice, my response has always been, well, the business office knows. They're correct. I have to, there's something we're doing wrong. EBuilder's not telling me what it needs to tell me then. And we went back and checked again, and I had to tell Bill that I just couldn't find it. And a few days later, he comes back to me and he says, "Tim, after you pushed back that hard," he said, "I went back and started looking at our books." And he said, "What we found was a calculation error in that we were counting things twice as payouts. And we've corrected it, and you are right." And I can't tell you how happy I was. It was like a celebration day. So that was a benefit in that they weren't connected. One could test against the other, but I think you have to be diligent and intentional about it, and I think every situation is probably going to be different. So here it's just a screenshot out of EBuilder. It's our budget, and it's just a representation of a particular project and all of the columns and lines that every project or every program would have. This is a report our school board gets, and it's an interesting one. There are 12 items there that make up the $100 million in bond. Those 12 kind of activities, you can see there's a new primary school, another new primary school, and then it starts talking about initiative-type projects. There's 12 of them. That's what we promised our voters in the bond election. We track everything back to those. And I got to tell you, it's an exercise to do that, because we've broken all of those 12 down into 64 or 5 projects. And when I run a report, it has to translate all of that data into these 12 line items. And through EBuilder, we're able to do it with extraordinary accuracy and at the push of a button. Last bond cycle, this would have taken me days, if not weeks, to do every time I'd produce a report. Now, it may not be quite as easy as I'm, making it sound, but here's the integrity. This is what they saw when they voted for this bond, and we report where we are on this at each report, and it's extremely powerful, and one of the reasons why I'm so happy with EBuilder. Here's a dashboard that I have. You see at the top says Tim's dashboard. These were custom to me. I don't need to spend a lot of time on them. You can kind of see what they are. But it's like the dashboard in your car and the needle moves. These were from probably November-ish. That's when I gave this presentation to start with. They've changed now more. The center top, that's cost to complete versus budget. You can see that it's in the red. At the time, what I can report today is that it's not in the red anymore. But that dashboard told us. We have an agreement with our school board that I will always tell them the truth. Even if we're over budget, I tell them we're over budget. And they understand that. They don't overreact. I don't have to cook the books. I just let it play out the way it is, and it tells us a story. And EBuilder is perfectly positioned to do that, an accurate, true story in real time, and from that comes the ability to make good decisions. And this dashboard represents that to me. Every day I get, this is a screenshot of an email I get every day, and it has the program line item summary, and there's another one, a companion to it, that is the cost line item summary. It comes directly out of EBuilder because it's real time. I see it every morning. I look at the bottom line in the right bottom hand corner, and then I look backwards to see what's changed through the day. Another very valuable piece of information. And it's real time, anywhere. I can view it at home. I can view it in a meeting, wherever it is. Forecasting, this was kind of a big deal for me when I went to the EBuilder conference this fall. There was some focus on forecasting, and we have since then been doing quite a lot of forecasting with our project managers. And it's, of course, very useful, and EBuilder is more than happy to tell anybody how that might work. But it's in there, and it's useful. This is our document control. Everybody uses the same number system. The files are there. I've been amazed at the ease that I can find stuff. I know which document is the right one. You can print it if you need to. You can send it someplace if you need to. You can email it to somebody, but it's always held and always accurate. We built in some flexibility that, and this might get to some detail that we don't really necessarily need to, but for us there's one project called 059 that is kind of a district-wide maintenance type holding project that has quite a few sub-projects within it, and we keep track of each of those through this particular project. But I wasn't sure at the very beginning if EBuilder had that kind of flexibility, or if you had to go through some major effort to create a new project every time you wanted to do it. Even for a small something, a $5,000 project, you still have to keep track of. And this was kind of our solution for it, and it really does work quite well.
Tim, we have a question from one of the attendees asking if the general contractor was involved with EBuilder during the course of construction of these jobs.
We are still in construction. We're not done, and our big ones, the two new schools, have not been bid yet. They bid in January, February, March, and those will be directly with contractors. We have one other fairly large project of renovations to 3 schools that a contractor is involved with, and the architect through EBuilder. A variety of these smaller ones, we have not brought the contractor into the EBuilder world. But EBuilder, of course, is the underlying management software that we use. And the value of that has not been lost. We have yet to truly experience a full project, a significant project like a new building with a contractor, but I have great hopes for it.
Great, thank you.
What eBuilder has done for us has re-energized our culture. There's no question. It just brought everybody to a different level. It allows us to not only use younger staff, but that staff really understands web-based stuff and technology, and it just, really jazzes them up. They get so excited about this, and I can see why. It's exciting to use. A great benefit. It has clearly enhanced collaboration. It's expanded our world beyond ourselves. It improves quality, no question. Allows flexibility. So here's a little story. I don't want to necessarily overstress it. It's one that just, it happened, but eBuilder was why it could happen. John was talking about HERE International, and Scott Prala, who was with us, extraordinarily smart and helpful program manager that helped set this up at the beginning, and knew all the detail and of how to do it. Became a power user of eBuilder. He's with HERE International. Certain things in his life changed, and he needed to move on. Because of our blended team, we had hired a bright, smart graduate from the Oregon State University out of their construction management program at the same time. And he was kind of mentoring under Scott and learning eBuilder as we went. And, of course, becoming more and more knowledgeable along the way. Well, when Scott got ready to leave, HERE went about trying to find a replacement for him, and the level and expertise that Scott brought was not easily found, and they struggled to try to find somebody. But Scott was leaving, and the date came closer and closer, and finally I said, I'm going to change. I'm going to make a little change here. What I want HERE to bring me is a good project manager. We've got these new schools. I'll assign a HERE project manager to the new schools for day-to-day project management, and I'm going to elevate our internal project manager, his name's Remo Douglas, to that kind of comptroller position, and we'll take it on from here. And that's exactly what we did. It's exactly what's happened. Scott left, I think, September-ish, and Remo has been extraordinarily successful in taking on the HERE management day-to-day activities around eBuilder. And that change then was a different staffing plan with HERE and resulted in a $376,000 deductive change order that was real money right then. Real money. I looked at it and said, wow, eBuilder's free. It was great. And we've been, carrying it out ever since perfectly well. But that's the adaptability and flexibility of eBuilder. There is a need for certain expertise at different times in a program. And recognizing that was a great benefit to us.
Hey, Tim, are you open to splitting the savings with eBuilder 50-50?
No, we'll just pay the license fee and keep going.
All right.
eBuilder's helped us, of course, with factual data. I have no question about what comes out of there. Real-time view, so useful when it's time to make decisions or be informed. You know that you're right there, and you can drill to whatever fact you want, as deep as you want to go. There's consistency in the reports. Our school board likes that an awful lot. Connection to the website. There's ours. It's in my opinion, it's as good as it gets for a public school doing public work. I would encourage everybody to go look at that. It's active all the time, and you can see where we are. records the story, starts the next chapter, and that's important. There's continuity in public agencies, and you need to carry that forward. It saved me time. It restored confidence. There's transparency because you can see into it. I'll let anybody see whatever they want to see whenever they want to see it. And there it is again. Builds integrity. At the end of the day, it saves money. There's less FTE. You'll recall that organizational chart from our O2 bond. 75 million, 8.5 FTE, 8.82 million per FTE. Here's what it is today. 100 million, similar work. There's 6.7 FTE, that's 14.9 million per FTE. I don't know how to say it any clearer, and it works. And we're probably doing a better job in many ways as I described.
You know, Tim, that...
So there we... Go ahead, John.
I was just going to say that the example you just mentioned of, you know, doing more work with the same or a reduced staff,
yes,
I think is really, you know, in this economy, what a lot of owners are trying to get to the same place that you've already gotten to.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, your story just reinforces, because we hear it on the news a lot, but then you say to yourself, but is that really happening? Is it true? And I think you're a good example of that in reality.
And it is true. I'm absolutely convinced. So here we are talking about partnerships. We live in one of the most beautifully amazing places on the planet. Behind me is the Columbia River Gorge. Beautiful place. We went up there with EBuilder during the implementation. Right beside me, our EBuilder staff, and then Scott Prala on the right. But that's what it is. It's a partnership. And one last thought here about using EBuilder. Be patient with it. It will pay off. It does pay off.
A question here was,
okay.
Did you cost load EBuilder so that you were generating change management and billings for each project via EBuilder? Was the question.
So just repeat the question.
Did you cost load EBuilder so that you're generating change management and billings for each project via EBuilder?
We did cost load EBuilder, and I'm not quite sure how to answer the rest of the question.
Yeah, I
Sorry.
think that maybe if Christina, who had asked the question, could clarify it while I address some of the other questions. The change management or billings question can be a little bit vague.
Yeah.
Were you able to perform cash flow projections with EBuilder is another question.
Oh, yes. We have been able to do that, and we do it regularly so that our business office is able to manage the whole bond and have maturity dates happen at the right time. I think it's updated regularly, and it's through EBuilder that that cash flow is produced, and it works really quite well.
Great, and what would you be? And Tim, I know you didn't know this, but because you have such integrity, you didn't need to know it. But I recognize halfway through the presentation that Scott is actually listening in on this presentation.
Oh, really?
And he actually wrote that he said, yes, we did handle change management, but not billings to others. And he says, we did handle expenditures, including approval status.
Yep.
So there's another question here was, did you use EBuilder in your presentations to the board? Oh,
absolutely. I mean, that's a lot of the power here. That's the transparency, right? We have a long-range planning committee. It's a group of patrons that acts as a bit of a bond oversight committee also. And in our interactions with these public agencies, we have talked a lot about EBuilder to start with. Of course, there was an investment, what it might do, and of course they want to know how it is doing. But we have had it up live with them, allowed questions about anything, and then a willingness to drill right to, say, an invoice, right to a specific invoice with my signature on it and date and the billing code, and this is what we spent, this is how much it was, and if you want to see more, we can show you even more. And you do that a few times, and people just become believers, not only in the integrity of EBuilder itself, because it works. You can look at anything in there, but in the integrity of the organization and the management of the bond, in that there's willingness to let them see anything unscripted. It's the most powerful part of the public side of managing a bond, and it's only through the EBuilder platform that you're able to do that.
Great.
I can't overstress that one.
Well, Tim, since you're an engineer and my background's in architecture, we'll put on our project management hats and call it a day right at 2 o'clock, so we're right on time.
All right.
I want to thank you very much. You give it to everybody straight, and I appreciate the time that we're able to get with you today. Thank you very much, and Tim, enjoy the beautiful rainy weather as you leave your work today, and Sergio and I will be thinking of you as we leave our offices in South Florida.
All right, and happy holidays to all of you.
All right, take care.